A dying man finished writing a book in 1948 that tech executives still refused to discuss in interviews, and when a Bloomberg reporter asked Jeff Bezos about it in 2019, he pivoted to drone delivery within 8 seconds. George Orwell completed 1984 on the Isle of Jura while battling tuberculosis, coughing blood between chapters as he raced to finish his warning. 75 years after publication, more than 200 million households have voluntarily installed the exact device he warned us about and then asked it to play music. Orwell got a lot wrong about the future. He never predicted the internet or smartphones. But the telescreen, that two-way device that watches you while you watch it, that listens even when you think it's off, that sits in your home as both entertainment system and surveillance apparatus, he got that exactly right. He predicted where we'd put it and how we'd feel about it. The Alexa on your kitchen counter shares an identical architecture with Winston Smith's telescreen, and this isn't a metaphor but a structural comparison. Once you see the parallel, the most terrifying thing about smart speakers becomes clear, and it's not that they're listening. What should frighten you is that we've stopped caring. Winston Smith, Orwell's protagonist, believed he'd found the one place in Oceania without a telescreen, a small rented room sat above Mr. Charrington's shop in the Prole district, decorated with a print of St. Clement's Church and furnished with an old mahogany bed. He brought Julia there to talk freely and make love and read Emmanuel Goldstein's forbidden book aloud. Privacy felt possible for the first time in his adult life. And that's when O'Brien's voice came through the wall. "You are the dead," it said. The print swung aside to reveal a telescreen that had been there the entire time, recording every whispered word, every moment Winston believed belonged to him alone. The thought police had captured everything and simply waited for the right moment. Bloomberg reported in 2019 that Amazon employs thousands of contractors across the globe to listen to Alexa recordings, and these workers sit in offices from Boston to Bucharest, transcribing commands and annotating conversations. They sometimes hear things users never intended to share, including medical information, drug deals, and what Bloomberg delicately called recordings of a sexual nature. Amazon had known everything and was simply processing. Orwell grasped something about surveillance that most people still miss. The telescreen's power never came from catching criminals, but from the uncertainty itself. The device might be watching at any moment in 1984, but you never knew which moment. Orwell wrote that you had to live from habit that became instinct, always assuming every sound you made was overheard and every movement scrutinized except in darkness. This principle traces back to the panopticon, philosopher Jeremy Bentham's 1791 prison design. The circular building allowed a single guard in a central tower to observe any cell at any time, but prisoners could never tell when they were being watched. Bentham's genius lay in efficiency, because you didn't need to watch everyone constantly. You just needed them to believe they could be watched constantly, and self-surveillance would kick in. Behavior would modify itself. Michel Foucault constructed an entire philosophy around Bentham's design. His book, Discipline and Punish, argued the panopticon wasn't merely a prison but a template for modern society, with schools and hospitals and factories all organized around the principle of potential observation. Foucault died in 1984, the year that shares its name with Orwell's novel. Orwell took the panopticon and translated it from architecture into technology. The telescreen functioned not just as a monitoring device, but as a behavioral modification engine disguised as furniture. The telescreen in 1984 had specific technical characteristics worth examining. It transmitted and received simultaneously. It could only be dimmed rather than turned completely off. And its microphone picked up sounds as quiet as a heartbeat. The party placed these devices in living spaces where people were most themselves, and citizens never learned exactly what was being recorded or when. Now consider the spec sheet for an Amazon Echo. It transmits and receives simultaneously and cannot be fully disabled without physical disconnection. Its microphone array contains 7 sensors, sensitive enough to hear you from across the room while music plays, and Amazon designed it specifically for kitchens and living rooms. Nobody has ever told you exactly what gets recorded or when. The parallel pairs line up in ways that should embarrass us. Oceania's telescreens sat in homes where residents had no choice because the party installed them and removal was impossible. The devices became infrastructure. Smart speakers in 2024 sit in homes where residents made a choice because Amazon priced them low enough. But trying to remove one now means dismantling your entire home automation system along with your routines and habits. These devices have also become infrastructure. Oceania's telescreens listened constantly for prohibited speech, keywords that flagged citizens for investigation, the crime of unapproved thought. Smart speakers in 2024 listen constantly for wake words like Alexa and Hey Google and Hey Siri. A study from Northeastern University's MoniOTR project found that smart speakers activate up to 19 times per day without wake words, triggered by television dialogue and conversation fragments and ambient noise. Contractors listen to private conversations to improve the service, which means the keyword system leaks. Oceania sent telescreen recordings to the Thought Police for analysis. Recordings in 2024 go to Amazon and Google and Apple for analysis. Edward Snowden revealed the NSA's PRISM program in 2013, and that revelation showed us these companies had already built the pipeline to government servers. The infrastructure sat waiting. The Thought Police look for dissent while these companies look for purchase intent, and those are different goals running on identical mechanisms. Most people dismiss this parallel because the outcomes feel so different. The Thought Police will vaporize you while Amazon will sell you a toaster. Orwell would tell you that's exactly the wrong lens. Harvard Business School professor Shoshana Zuboff coined a term for what we're experiencing, calling it surveillance capitalism. Her framework describes an economic logic that treats human experience as free raw material for behavioral prediction and modification. Zuboff argued across 700 pages that what Google and Amazon discovered wasn't merely a new business model, but a new form of power. Not the power to punish, but the power to predict and eventually to shape. The most chilling passage in 1984 isn't the torture in Room 101. It's the description of the proles, the 85% of Oceania's population that the party barely bothered to surveil. The proles had telescreens too, but theirs were optional. The party permitted them more privacy than it allowed its own members, and yet the proles never rebelled. They never even thought about rebelling. O'Brien explains why during Winston's interrogation. "We are not interested in those stupid crimes that you have committed," he says. "The party is not interested in the overt act. The thought is all we care about." The proles could have privacy because their thoughts were already controlled. The entertainment piped through their telescreens, the lottery results and pornography, an endless supply of rubbishy newspapers, had done the work of surveillance without requiring any watching at all. Their desires had been shaped and their attention captured, which meant they were controlled without being coerced. That phrase deserves repetition: controlled without being coerced. Think about what smart speakers actually do when they're not listening. They play podcasts that reshape your worldview and answer questions in ways that subtly frame reality. They control what music your children hear and what news you wake up to and what products appear when you say you need something. The listening becomes almost beside the point because the telescreen's true function was never surveillance. It was the delivery mechanism for everything else. Orwell named this mechanism doublethink, the ability to hold two contradictory beliefs simultaneously and accept both. The telescreen was simultaneously a surveillance device and an entertainment system. You knew it watched you, but you also needed it for news and culture and the 2 minutes hate that made you feel connected to society. You hated the telescreen, and you also couldn't imagine life without it. Addiction researchers use a different term for the same phenomenon, calling it ambivalence. The alcoholic knows drinking is killing them and reaches for the bottle anyway. The gambler understands the odds and puts the chips down anyway. Amazon's internal research shows that the primary barrier to smart speaker adoption isn't price or features, but privacy concerns. And yet, adoption rates keep climbing. A 2023 NPR survey found that 57% of smart speaker owners felt somewhat or very concerned about privacy, and 91% of those same people plan to keep using the device. We've developed population-scale ambivalence toward our own surveillance, and that's not a metaphor but a clinical observation. The obvious objection is that you can turn your Alexa off. You can unplug it. Winston couldn't turn off his telescreen, and that seems like a meaningful difference. Orwell anticipated this argument. Winston learns in the novel that inner party members can turn their telescreens off, but only for 30 minutes at a time. The privilege of occasional privacy was permitted to the elite, making them feel special and making the surveillance feel voluntary. But the infrastructure remained and the capability remained, and the ministry could override any off switch whenever it chose. Mark Zuckerberg posted a photo of his desk in 2016, and eagle-eyed viewers noticed he'd taped over his laptop's camera and microphone. The man who built the world's largest surveillance network doesn't trust his own devices. Former Apple employees report that executives routinely disable Siri on personal devices. The inner party members who control the telescreens don't leave their own telescreens on. You can unplug your Echo in 2024, but the microphone in your phone stays on. The microphone in your laptop stays on. Your smart TV contains a microphone, and Vizio settled with the FTC in 2017 for tracking viewing habits without consent. Your car has a microphone. Your Ring doorbell, also owned by Amazon, watches your porch and shares footage with over 2,000 police departments without requiring a warrant. The infrastructure has become so distributed that unplugging one node accomplishes nothing because the surveillance doesn't live in a single device. It lives in the mesh. Every software update and every terms of service change you don't read, and every new feature that requires always listening to work represents the ministry overriding your off switch. The principle from 1984 that should keep you awake at night isn't the surveillance itself. The party's slogan wasn't "Big Brother is watching you for surveillance purposes," but as a test. If you could walk past that poster every day, if you could look directly at the telescreen and go about your business, then you had already internalized the surveillance. You had already modified your own behavior and already become your own thought police. The poster's function was normalization. Orwell understood this mechanism better than any tech critic writing today. Surveillance doesn't work through fear alone, but through habituation. The first time you realize your phone heard you mention needing new shoes and then served you a shoe ad, you feel violated. The 10th time brings annoyance. The 100th time brings nothing. By the 1,000th time, you might even find it convenient. Ecologists have a name for this pattern, calling it shifting baseline syndrome. Each generation accepts the degraded state they inherited as normal. Fishermen today think the ocean has always had this few fish because they never saw the abundance their grandparents knew. We think homes have always had listening devices because we've already forgotten what privacy felt like. Children born after 2015 have never known a home without a smart speaker or a doorbell camera or a voice assistant in their parents' phones. The baseline has shifted, and they won't even know what they've lost. Amazon knows this, and Google knows this. Every privacy scandal fades, and every congressional hearing produces sound bites without legislation. Representative Anna Eshoo has questioned Amazon executives about always-on functionality multiple times, and nothing changes. Every news cycle moves on, while every month brings devices more deeply integrated into homes and cars and workplaces and children's bedrooms. Children in 1984 were encouraged to report their parents to the thought police. The Youth League, called the Spies, trained children to treat surveillance as a game, teaching them that parents could be thought criminals who needed watching. Amazon sells the Echo.Kids edition in 2024. Parental controls mean the device listens to children and reports what it hears to parents and to Amazon and to the algorithms. Amazon markets this as COPPA compliant, referencing the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, designed to protect kids under 13. COPPA was written in 1998 before always-on microphones existed, which means the law has no framework for devices that listen to children continuously. The device teaches children that always-on listening feels normal and friendly and just part of the furniture. By the time these children reach adulthood, the telescreen won't feel like surveillance. It will feel like home. And this is where Orwell's warning proves insufficient. He imagined the party would have to force this upon us and that resistance would emerge naturally. He imagined the proles as an escape hatch, too numerous to monitor and too unimportant to control. His dystopia required totalitarian government to function. What Orwell didn't imagine was the market. The party's surveillance cost enormously because it required human monitors and physical infrastructure and constant enforcement. Inefficiency is why the proles were left largely alone. Surveillance capitalism inverted the economics entirely. The monitoring pays for itself because every recording trains an algorithm that serves better ads, that generate more revenue, that funds more monitoring. The system sustains itself. The party had to coerce compliance, while Amazon just has to make compliance pleasant enough through free shipping and convenient reorders, and a friendly voice that tells jokes and plays music and never judges you for asking the same question twice. Orwell imagined we'd be forced, and he was wrong. We volunteered and paid for the privilege. We put the telescreens in our kitchens and bedrooms and children's rooms with full knowledge that they were listening, and we decided the convenience was worth it. He imagined we'd resist. He was too optimistic about us. We're worse than he feared. The party's final victory in 1984 isn't Winston's torture or Room 101 or even the bullet he knows is coming. The final victory arrives in the moment. Winston looks at the telescreen broadcasting Big Brother's face and feels love, genuine love. The surveillance has become indistinguishable from affection. A study found that children who grow up with Alexa often say please and thank you to the device. They do this not because anyone requires it, but because they want to, because they've developed a relationship with it, because the line between tool and companion has blurred. Winston loved Big Brother. Your children love Alexa. Orwell understood something we're still learning. The surveillance state doesn't arrive through tyranny, but through convenience. It doesn't require secret police, but products people genuinely want. It doesn't need to be forced, but frictionless. Orwell wrote that the telescreen could be dimmed, but there was no way of shutting it off completely. That was the design, not a bug, but a feature. It had to be functional enough to be useful and provide enough entertainment to be wanted, but it could never be fully turned off because the infrastructure needed to remain intact for the moment when watching was required. Amazon's engineers made the same design choice. The Echo's microphone stays on by design because it has to hear the wake word. You can mute it, but then it loses its primary function. The functionality requires the surveillance, and the surveillance enables the functionality. They're inseparable by architecture. Next time you walk past your smart speaker, notice what you feel. If you feel nothing, if it's become invisible, just another appliance you'd no more notice than your toaster, then normalization is complete. You've become habituated and your behavior has been modified, not by force but by design. Orwell died in January 1950, 7 months after 1984 reached publication. He was 46 years old. He never saw a television become standard in British homes, or held a computer, or touched a smartphone. He never heard of Amazon or Google or the internet that would connect them all. But he understood the mechanism. He understood that surveillance without consequences is just data collection, and that data collection without behavior modification is just storage. The real power of the telescreen was never watching or listening, but shaping. It trained a population to accept that the boundary between public and private, between observed and unobserved, between self and system, was negotiable. We negotiated it away for free 2-day shipping. Aldous Huxley taught Orwell at Eton and wrote his own dystopia called Brave New World in 1932. Years later, he sent Orwell a letter suggesting the younger writer had the mechanism wrong. Within the next generation, Huxley wrote, the ruling oligarchy will find less arduous ways of governing. No need for torture or boots stamping on faces. People would come to love their oppression and adore the technologies that undo their capacity to think. Orwell thought we'd be destroyed by what we fear. Huxley thought we'd be destroyed by what we love. Both men were right. We fear the surveillance, and we love the convenience, and we hold both truths simultaneously. That's doublethink, and we're living it. George Orwell would be terrified of smart speakers, but not because we're living in 1984. We're living in the version where the party didn't need to seize power. We gave it to them voluntarily with a smile, and then we asked it to set a timer for 15 minutes because the pasta's almost done. Dystopian literature and consumer technology seem like worlds apart, but the underlying architecture connects everywhere. The telescreen and the echo, the panopticon and the always-on microphone, the party's slogan and Amazon's terms of service. Orwell and Huxley and Foucault and Zuboff all pointed at the same structure from different angles. That's what this channel does, finding hidden patterns that connect unrelated fields and mechanisms that explain why things work the way they do and what to do about it. If you want to see how other forgotten warnings illuminate modern problems, subscribe. Next week explores why a 1960s psychology experiment predicted exactly how social media would break democracy. Here's the question to sit with. Which of your devices have you stopped noticing? Not the ones that concern you, but the ones you've stopped seeing entirely. That's where the telescreen lives now, in the furniture, in the convenience, in the love,